3 years. 3 long years of silence. A cold distance that hung heavier than the scorching desert heat outside the towering walls of the opulent palace. The billionaire sheikh stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his silhouette framed by the golden rays of the setting sun that fell upon the endless dunes of his emirate. His gaze was distant, eyes reflecting the weight of a vow that bound him, a silent promise that kept him from touching the woman beside him, yet tethered his heart in chains of invisible iron. The desert's endless expanse mirrored the void that had grown between them, vast, unforgiving, and filled with secrets neither dared to utter. Here, in the heart of imperial luxury, the air was thick with the scent of burning incense and the rich warmth of silk drapes that whispered with every faint breeze. Every corner of the palace spoke of wealth beyond measure, carved marble, intricate gold filigree, and crystal chandeliers that cast fiery reflections like distant stars. Yet none of this opulence could soften the coldness that settled each night between the billionaire sheikh and his bride. She stood quietly by the grand arched doorway, a figure of restrained grace, wrapped in silks softer than a whisper. Her eyes, dark and deep like the ancient wells of the desert, held pain veiled beneath layers of courage. She endured the loneliness with a silent strength, her heart a battleground of unspoken desires and relentless questions. How could a marriage so rich in grandeur be filled with such emptiness? How long could she survive this? Marriage devoid of touch or tenderness. His hands, capable of wielding power and shaping empires, trembled ever so slightly when she dared to meet his eyes. A storm roared beneath his calm facade. Memories of betrayals past, the scars of a trust shattered, and that cruel promise carved into his very soul. He had vowed never to cross the final barrier, to keep her at arm's length, convinced that distance would shield them both from a greater pain. But the nights were long, and the silence was deafening. Their exchanged glances were weapons and shields, sharp edges glinting with resentments buried too deep to show. Every brush of her silken sleeve against his robe sparked an electric hesitation, a war of wills where neither would yield. Her breath caught when his gaze faltered, a fleeting crack in the fortress he'd built. Yet pride held them captive, locking their words in cages of restraint. Then, in the shadowed gardens where moonlight kissed the marble fountains, everything shifted. A letter, delivered in the dead of night, slipped beneath the door with the scent of jasmine and danger. His hand closed around the parchment, heart pounding wildly. The silent vow was in jeopardy. The words etched across the page threatened to unravel years of torment and distance. With a rare flash of vulnerability, the billionaire sheikh turned sharply to face his bride, eyes burning like embers ready to ignite. His voice, rough and breaking through the years of frozen walls, whispered a promise long withheld. Tonight, the silence would end. Before the next secret of this opulent emirate unfolds, make sure you're part of our caravan of stories. Many destinies are yet to be shaped, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if the heart of this sheikh has already intrigued you. Tell me in the comments, from which city are you following this saga? And what twist do you think is coming? Your passion for these dramas is what inspires us to continue. Thank you for being with us. The heavy parchment trembled slightly in his hand as the scent of jasmine lingered, weaving through the cool night air of the palace's shadowed gardens. The moon cast an ethereal glow on the marble fountains, their waters shimmering like liquid silver. But no beauty could soften the storm raging in. The billionaire Sheikh's eyes, his fists clenched tightly around the letter, crumpling the edges as if he could crush the very words threatening to undo years of silence and calculated restraint. Across the courtyard, the princess stood still, her silhouette bathed in moonlight. Her chest rose and fell in silent rhythm, every breath a fragile poem of hope and fear. The moment his eyes met hers was electric. A collision of unspoken truths and buried longing. For 3 years, she had worn her loneliness like a crown heavier than the jeweled diadem atop her head. But tonight, the invisible chains that bound them had begun to shatter. The Sheikh's voice broke the stillness, low and rough, the years of cold reserve giving way to something raw and urgent. "Why now?" he demanded. Every syllable laced with pain. She swallowed, the secret trembling on her lips. Because the past refuses to stay buried. Her gaze held steady despite the storm in his eyes. The letter slipped from his trembling fingers, floating down onto the marble floor like a fallen petal, fragile yet deadly. In that instant, the palace seemed to hold its breath. The scent of burning incense mingled with the cool desert breeze as unseen eyes watched from behind ornate lattice windows. The court's whispering intrigue awakening once again. He stepped closer, eyes narrowed, the weight of his power evident in the broad expanse of his shoulders beneath the embroidered silk robe. Yet the fire in his gaze was no longer just the cold flame of pride. It was the unspoken terror of a man realizing his fortress of control might finally fall. "Show me," he ordered. Her hands shook as she produced a second letter, aged and fragile, the ink faded but legible. "This was sent to my family before the marriage," she confessed. "Something they never told me, something that explains everything. The silence, the distance." Her voice cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath her composed facade. He broke the seal with trembling fingers, eyes scanning the lines until he froze. The words spoke of betrayal, a conspiracy rooted in jealousy and greed that threatened not only their union, but the very throne he was destined to inherit. Beneath the moon's cold light, the gulf between them narrowed, just a breath. Two hearts caught in a tempest of secrets that had festered too long in the darkness. "I was a fool," he whispered, voice thick, "a prisoner of my own anger and pride." The walls of his chest cracked, exposing the scarred man beneath the opulent robes and the ruthless reputation. Her eyes softened, a flicker of hope blossoming amid the desert's endless night. "Then let me help you break free," she urged softly. "We are chained by the past only if we choose to be." Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the corridors, a summons that shattered the fragile truce between them. The palace's shadowed halls concealed more than whispers. They hid dangers that could topple empires. He folded the letters with deadly precision and tucked them into the folds of his robe, his jaw tightening with the weight of an impossible choice. "We will face this darkness together," he vowed, voice a low promise, meant only for her. Yet even as he spoke, the ghost of doubt lingered in his gaze, the question of whether love could truly conquer the secrets that clawed at their souls. She nodded, stepping forward until the faintest whisper of silk brushed against his arm. For a fleeting moment, the cold barrier between them dissolved, replaced by a fragile warmth neither dared to claim. But the night was far from over. As the moon plunged behind a veil of clouds, a shadow detached itself from the depths of the palace gardens. Hidden beneath a hood, a figure observed the pair with burning eyes, lips curling into a cruel smile. "The Sheikh's past is about to unravel," the stranger whispered, voice dripping with malice, "and with it his greatest secret." The air thickened once again with tension, the fragile hope hanging by a thread. Somewhere deep within the heart of the emirate, an enemy stirred, one who knew that to bring down a billionaire sheikh, one must strike where it hurts most. Inside the grand chamber, the sheikh's gaze darted to the torn edge of the letter, still clutched in her hand. The scent of jasmine had turned bitter, a reminder that even the scent of love could mask the poison of betrayal. He took her hand, roughened by years of command, yet trembling with newfound resolve. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we begin the reckoning. But before dawn, a secret long buried in the depths of the palace would rise, threatening to ignite fires that even the desert sun could not extinguish. And the sheikh's vow of silence, the invisible iron chains, would shatter in blood and fire. A name escaped the lips of the stranger in the shadows, a name burned into the very foundation of their doomed destiny. Najib. The wind carried the whisper through the night, and with it, the promise of a storm that would consume them all. The palace seemed to hold its breath as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the vast desert sky in hues of blood and gold. Inside the grand chamber, the billionaire sheikh's fingers lingered on the folded letters hidden beneath his robe, the weight of the revelations pressing against his every thought like an unyielding storm. He stood motionless, the air thick with unspoken questions. His bride watched him from across the room, her eyes a mirror of the tumult swirling inside him. Hope entwined with fear, resilience forged through years of silence. "Najib," he finally muttered, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. The ghost from their past was no longer a whisper, but a shadow creeping closer. She stepped forward, the delicate rustle of her silk gown breaking the suffocating quiet. "He betrayed us," she said softly, voice carrying the pain they both felt, but rarely acknowledged. The sheikh's lips thinned, jaw tightening with a fury contained only by the opulence surrounding him. Memories flickered, the treacherous smile of Najib, once a trusted advisor, now the harbinger of their shared torment. The man who had poisoned the well of their union before it could truly bloom. All this time, the Sheikh whispered. I blamed walls, silence, even you. But the real poison was hidden in the shadows we refused to see. Her gaze locked onto his, fierce, despite the vulnerability that danced there. Then we tear those shadows apart, together. A fragile alliance sparked between them, fleeting yet potent. A promise born from the ashes of betrayal and neglect. Yet beyond the palace's gilded walls, the winds of danger whispered through hidden corridors. Servants moved like ghosts, their eyes lowering as they passed, weighed down by secrets too dangerous for daylight. The inner sanctum, once a sanctuary of wealth and power, had twisted into a battlefield where loyalty was a currency more volatile than gold. The Sheikh paced, the sound of his footsteps echoing against marble floors. His mind raced, strategies unfurling like the intricate patterns embroidered on his robe. Najib's treachery had breached not only their trust, but threatened the very core of his empire. She followed silently, her hand brushing against his sleeve in a gesture both tentative and defiant. I have news, she confessed, voice a whisper barely heard over the roar of his thoughts. Najib has allies inside the palace, hidden, waiting. They listen to every breath, every word. The Sheikh stopped abruptly, dark eyes narrowing. The scent of jasmine, once a symbol of fragile romance, now mingled with the bitter taste of suspicion. Then we must root them out before those shadows consume us. Outside, the desert sun climbed higher, casting sharp light upon the gleaming spires and sprawling gardens, indifferent to the storm brewing within. In the private quarters, the couple sat close, the cold distance of years thawing under urgent necessity. Their fingers brushed, hesitant sparks setting the tinder of old wounds aflame. The Billionaire Sheikh's facade of steel began to crumble, revealing fractures carved by loneliness and regret. You were right to trust me, despite everything, he murmured, voice heavy with anguish. But my world is not a simple one. Each step forward may invite another blade in our backs. Her eyes shimmered, unwavering. Then I will stand as your shield, your strength, no matter the cost. A fleeting smile flared, a fragile bloom amid the desert's harshness. It was the first promise of redemption whispered in years. But the night was not finished with them yet. A distant clatter echoed through the marbled halls, sudden and sharp, in urgent summons that shattered the fragile peace. Both rose, tension sharpening their gaze as they moved toward the source. The palace guards awaited, faces pale, bearing news that twisted the dagger deeper. The southern wing has been breached, the chief guard reported in a voice tight with alarm. Najib's men are inside. The Sheikh's heart thundered, not with fear, but with the roar of a man whose empire and heart were under siege. His bride's hand found his own, steadying him amid the chaos. Together, they strode toward the depths of the palace, where shadows clung like a suffocating shroud. In the dim corridor, a figure slipped through the darkness, silent, resolute. The Sheikh's breath caught, recognizing the silhouette before words could form. Najib. His eyes gleamed with malicious triumph, a sinister smile carving across his face as he stepped into the flickering torchlight. Do you truly believe your throne is safe? The Sheikh's voice was a low growl, fierce yet controlled. This empire is built on more than gold and power, Najib. It is built on the truth I will expose tonight." Najib laughed, cold and cutting. "Then prepare for a reckoning, for the desert does not forgive easily." The princess tightened her grip on the sheikh's arm, the sudden surge of adrenaline mingling with a tentative hope. They stood, united and vulnerable, beneath the vaulted ceilings, their fate entwined as enemies circled like vultures. Outside, the desert wind began to howl, carrying secrets, threats, and the promise of a storm no palace walls could contain. As the first clash of steel rang out in the shadowed halls, the billionaire sheikh looked to his bride, determination blazing fierce in his eyes. "Tonight," he breathed, "we claim our destiny." But behind Najib's cruel smile lurked a secret darker than any blade, a revelation that would rend their world and tear the fragile threads that still bound their hearts. In that moment, as the palace trembled with the fury of impending war, a whispered voice sliced through the carnage. "Not all betrayals bleed visibly. Some wounds are hidden, and the deepest cuts lie within." The sheikh's eyes widened as realization dawned, a cold shiver tracing down his spine. The true enemy was not just Najib. It was someone far closer than he had ever dared to fear. The corridors of the palace whispered with shadows and secrets, as the night deepened into an abyss of uncertainty. The scent of jasmine, once a delicate caress upon the air, now twisted into something sharp, an unseen blade cutting through the veneer of opulence. The billionaire sheikh moved with deliberate grace, his every step measured but heavy with the weight of impending confrontation. His bride trailed silently behind, her heart pounding a fierce rhythm that echoed the turbulent storm within him. In the vast span of the marble chambers, their footsteps seemed to shatter the fragile illusion of peace that had held them captive for years. The name Najib, uttered just hours before, hung between them like a curse, an invisible noose, tightening with every passing breath. They reached the grand hall where shadows pooled beneath the towering pillars, and there, waiting like a specter of treachery, stood the man whose betrayal threatened to unravel not just their union, but the empire itself. Najib's eyes gleamed with cruel delight, a smile twisting his lips into a smirk that promised ruin. "You are far from safe, Sheikh," Najib taunted, voice dripping with venom. "Your kingdom is built on lies and silences, a house of cards trembling at the slightest breeze." The sheikh's jaw clenched, his gaze burning with a fierce determination that hid the fractures deep within his soul. "I have lived with shadows long enough," he said low, voice a warning thunder beneath the polished grandeur. "Tonight, those shadows learn the price of betrayal." The princess stepped forward, her silken gown a soft whisper against the cold marble floor. Her eyes flashed with the defiant fire that had sustained her through the years of silence and rejection. "You will find no allies here," she declared, fingers tightening around the edge of her gown as if drawing strength from its softness. "This palace stands not just on stone, but on loyalty and truth." Najib laughed, a sound as cold and empty as the desert night. "Truth is a commodity for the powerful, to wield as they please. You both have been blinded by pride, and now the desert itself will swallow you." The Sheikh's voice rose, cutting through the tension like a scimitar gleaming in moonlight. "Enough." His gaze locked sharply on Najib's. "You will answer for your treachery, not tonight, not in secret, but before all who believe in this empire." Steps echoed from behind them. Guards appeared, faces set with grim resolve. Their presence, a silent assurance that the tides were about to shift. Najib's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, the weight of impending justice crowding his arrogance. The princess drew closer to the sheikh. Their proximity, a fragile truce forged in fire and fear. Her breath was steady now, carrying the scent of rare amber and desert winds, blending with the sharp tang of tension in the air. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but held an unyielding promise. "We are no longer prisoners of the past," she said. "Tonight, we fight not only for our future, but for the broken pieces of our hearts." The sheikh's gaze softened, the steel in his eyes melting into something raw, vulnerable. For a fleeting heartbeat, the chasm of silence that had stretched across. Their years seemed to narrow, replaced by an unspoken understanding. The glimmer of hope ignited within them, fragile yet fierce. But as the palace held its collective breath, a distant whisper slithered through the halls, an unseen threat that neither the sheikh nor the princess had yet perceived. Behind the towering curtains, a figure wrapped in shadow moved with stealth, born from years of hidden motives. The eyes that watched gleamed with a predator's hunger, lips curling into a sinister smile. Najib's betrayal was merely the beginning. Amid the ornate tapestries and gilded frames, another secret stirred, one deeper than any dagger's wound, darker than any whispered conspiracy. As the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, the sheikh's "Najib is only the first move in a game far more deadly." The princess touched his arm, her fingers lingering as if anchoring them both to a fragile reality. "Then we must unmask the true enemy before they strike again." A sudden clamor shattered the fragile calm. A servant's frantic footsteps echoed down the marbled passage, breathless and urgent. "Your Highness," the messenger gasped, eyes wide with terror. "There's news, another breach." Within the palace walls, the sheikh's fists clenched, veins pulsing with a mix of fury and dread. The court's labyrinth held more shadows than they had imagined, and now those shadows moved with purpose. The princess stepped forward, her voice steely with newfound strength. "Then the reckoning is not far. We will face this darkness together." The distant cry of the desert wind rose, carrying with it the whispers of war, vengeance, and a hidden blade poised to strike at their very hearts. And as the horizon blushed with the first cruel rays of morning, the billionaire sheikh's eyes darkened with the certainty that the battle for his empire and for his love had only just begun. But beneath the glittering chandeliers and carved pillars lurked a truth so devastating that when it came to light, it would shatter every fragile hope they had dared to hold on to. A soft murmur, carried by the desert breeze, curled through the palace halls. One name, spoken with lethal intent, a name that would turn allies into enemies and loyalty into betrayal. Layla, The first light of dawn struggled to pierce the thick veil of tension hanging heavy over the palace. The grand hall, usually a monument to opulence and power, now echoed with whispers drenched in suspicion and fear. The scent of jasmine lingered faintly, clashing with the metallic taste of impending danger that filled the air. The billionaire Sheikh's gaze burned a fierce path through the shadows, his silhouette sharp against the carved marble pillars. Each measured breath he drew was a battle between storm and restraint, the weight of Najib's betrayal crashing against a heart long fortified by pride and pain. His bride stood close beside him, a silent pillar of strength, adorned in silks that shimmered like moonlight on desert sands. Her dark eyes, gleaming with resolve, held the storm within her, a tempest of courage born from years of loneliness and unspoken truths. Najib's smirk still haunted the corners of the room, a poison that seeped deeper than any blade could reach. But the Sheikh's voice, low and unwavering, shattered the brittle calm. This palace will no longer harbor shadows. A single beat passed, heavy and loaded, before the princess stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though beneath it fluttered the fragile tremors of hope. We will not allow secrets to destroy what remains of us. These walls bear witness to loyalty, not deceit. Her words fell like a solemn vow as the Sheikh's eyes flickered to hers, an unspoken promise passing between them. For the first time in years, the cold distance that had settled between them felt like it might crumble beneath the weight of shared determination. Yet, beneath the surface, treacheries still lurked. The whispered steps of courtiers moved like shadows that neither flame nor daylight could banish. Their intentions veiled, their allegiance torn between survival and ambition. The Sheikh paced restlessly, his every step echoing through the cavernous hall with the steadiness of a fated march. His mind spun a web of strategies and counterplots, each thought a flicker of hope battling despair. The name Najib was a festering wound, a stark reminder of trust violated. Her hand found his sleeve, steady and warm. They listen, waiting for their moment to strike, she murmured, voice low but firm. Najib's reach spreads deeper than we imagined. A flash of anger darkened his eyes, quickly tempered by the cold precision that defined a ruler, seasoned by battles both seen and unseen. Then we root out every deceit, hiding in the shadows before they strike. Outside, the desert wind whispered of approaching turmoil, rustling through the palace gardens with a haunting melody. The fountain's waters glimmered silver under a reluctant moon, their gentle song contrasting the brewing storm within walls drenched in secrets. The couple retreated to the sanctuary of their private chambers, an oasis of silence amidst the turmoil. As the door closed, the long-standing walls of separation began to dissolve. Their fingers brushed tentatively, a spark that sent ripples through the fragile peace. In those small touches, years of neglect and pain simmered, battling with a flame that refused to die. The Sheikh's voice was hoarse with vulnerability. You stood beside me when I was lost in bitterness. Her lips curved in a faint, weary smile. Because beneath the pride, I always saw the man you fear to be. His gaze softened, cracks appearing in the armor of command. The path ahead is perilous. Every step risks another blade in our backs. Her eyes blazed with unwavering determination. Then we become each other's shield. No force can break us if we stand united. Just as hope began to bloom in this fragile truce, the sudden sharp clatter of hurried footsteps shattered the moment. The tension strangled the air, turning it thick and suffocating. Guards appeared, faces pale and eyes wide with alarm. The chief guard's voice trembled as he spoke. "Your Highness, the southern wing has been breached. Najib's men have infiltrated the palace." The Sheikh's heart thundered, not with fear, but the fierce roar of a man whose empire and love hang perilously in the balance. His bride's steady hand gripped his arm, anchoring them amid the chaos that surged like a tide against their walls. Together, they moved through dim corridors where shadows clung like vipers, their presence a constant whisper of betrayal. The palace, once a bastion of luxury and sanctuary, now felt like a cage of fractured trust and looming war. In the flickering torchlight, a silhouette materialized. Najib stepped forward, his cruel smile a razor's edge. "Do you truly believe you still command this kingdom?" he taunted, voice velvet-coated in venom. The Sheikh's voice was a growl, a mountain shaking before the storm. "My empire is built on truth, something you will never understand." Najib laughed, cold and hollow. "Truth is a weapon for the powerful. Soon you will fall beneath its weight." The princess tightened her grip on the Sheikh's arm, a beacon of defiance amidst encroaching darkness. "We fight for more than a throne. We fight for our hearts, for the love you tried to poison." Their stance was unyielding, a fragile fortress formed from years of suffering and silent hope. But as steel clashed and cries echoed down the palace halls, a whisper carried through the shadows, a secret darker than Najib's betrayal, lurking where none dared to look. The Sheikh's eyes snapped wide with sudden realization. The true enemy was not only Najib, but the hand that guided him from the darkness. Someone far closer, cloaked beneath a mask of loyalty. The palace trembled not just with war, but with a betrayal that would shatter every fragile bond before dawn. And in the deepest shadows, a familiar voice hissed, barely audible, yet heavy with doom. "Lila." The grand hall was suffused with a fragile silence, as if even the ancient stone pillars were holding their breath. Outside, the desert wind whispered a restless warning, slipping through the carvings and ornate arches like a secret messenger. Within these gilded walls, the billionaire Sheikh's cloak of composure was wearing thin, his sharp eyes flicking between the shadows that seemed to gather like predators on the edge of the light. His bride stood close, though neither dared to close the gap entirely. The years of distance had built invisible walls, but tonight, hope and fear battled fiercely beneath their surface. Her hand hovered near his, tremulous but unyielding, an unspoken promise that she would face whatever storm had come to their palace by his side. Najib's betrayal was no longer just a whisper in the dark. It had taken form, a cruel contagion, poisoning trust and hope alike. The Sheikh's voice broke the quiet, low and steady, though etched with iron-hard resolve. This palace will no longer be a refuge for traitors. His gaze sharpened. We root them out tonight. The princess nodded, her eyes blazing with the fire of rebellion born from years of silent endurance. Her voice was a whispered command, fragile yet fierce. Loyalty must be reborn from the ashes of deceit. Together they moved through the labyrinthine corridors that twisted like veins through the heart of the palace. The scent of spiced amber mixed with the distant echoes of hurried footsteps and muffled voices, a tension that crawled under skin and silk alike. Each footfall was a drumbeat of fate. The opulence around them, crystal chandeliers scattering fractured light, dense tapestries whispering ancient stories, became a cage, the weight of secrets heavier than the golden ceilings. The air was thick with despair and anticipation, and the night itself seemed to hold a blade poised above their heads. A sudden movement caught his eye, a flash of shadow slipping between pillars. The Sheikh's breath hitched, fingers flexing instinctively at his side. The princess's hand found his sleeve, a lifeline anchoring them to reality and to each other. Ahead, the gallery doors swung open with a whispered creak. There, bathed in the cold clarity of moonlight, streaming through stained glass, stood Najib. His sickly smile was a knife, twisting in wounds too fresh to heal. "You believe this fortress of grandeur can shield you?" Najib taunted, voice dripping venom. "Your throne is nothing but sand, shifting and crumbling under your feet." The Sheikh stepped forward, regal wrath burning behind his eyes. "This empire stands on more than walls and wealth. It stands on truth and honor, things you have discarded." Najib laughed, hollow and cruel. "Truth? Honor? Fairy tales for fools. Your pride blinds you to the reality. The desert consumes everything in time." His mocking gaze flicked to the princess. "And your loyalties? How fragile are they beneath the weight of betrayal?" The princess's eyes locked fiercely with Najib's, her voice a steel edge slicing through the tension. "Stronger than your lies, we survive because of the bonds you could never break." The silence fell heavy, broken only by the distant drip of water from a marble fountain. The Sheikh's jaw tightened as memories flickered. Years lost in cold silence, nights spent trembling beneath the weight of unsaid words, the agony of love deferred. But tonight, the storm within him raged against the chains of regret. Without warning, Najib's expression shifted, darkening as shadows gathered behind him. Guards loyal no longer, allies to the traitor's cause, emerging like specters from hidden corridors. Steel gleamed under moonlight as weapons were drawn, echoing sharply through the vast space. The palace, once a sanctuary, became an arena of peril. The Sheikh's hand found hers at last, fingers curling with the strength of their shared resolve. "We fight, not just for power, but for a future carved from truth," he murmured, voice fierce and brittle with emotion. Her breath caught, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, the tenderness beneath the warrior's courage. For love that endures all storms. The battle erupted, clashing swords ringing through marbled galleries, whispered spells of ancient loyalty, and whispered oaths, clashing amid flying silk and swirling dust. In the chaos, a sharp scream shattered the night, an echo cutting through the fierce symphony of conflict. The Sheikh's eyes darted toward the high balcony, where amidst the swirling shadows, a figure cloaked in midnight movement slipped silently away. The contours of a face he knew too well. Layla. A cold chill raced down his spine. The betrayal was deeper than Najib's treachery. The walls seemed to close tighter, the oppressive weight of deceit threatening to crush the fragile hope blossoming between them. He shouted commands, but his gaze was fixated on that disappearing shadow, a ghost from the past whose secrets threatened to ignite the final conflagration. The princess pulled him close, their hearts pounding in unison, a tempest of fury, grief, and desperate hope. "We cannot trust even the whispers," she whispered fiercely. "The enemy is no longer just at the gates." The Sheikh's voice broke, low and sharp. Layla's betrayal cuts like a blade in the dark. Outside, the desert wind rose, howling its ancient dirge. The palace trembled beneath the weight of hidden wars and secrets clawing to the surface. And as the first streaks of dawn bled into the sky, a cruel truth settled like a venomous whisper in the deepest chambers of their souls. The greatest danger was yet to come, and it wore a name that would shatter everything they had fought to build. The tension thickened like a desert storm as the grand palace held its breath beneath looming chandeliers. The night had become a battleground of shadows and whispered betrayals, every step echoing a promise of reckoning. The billionaire sheikh moved through the vast marble corridors with a predator's grace, his cloak whispering secrets along its embroidered edge. Beside him, his bride moved silently, her silk gown a shimmering ghost in the moonlight, her dark eyes blazing with a fierce determination born from years of enduring silence. Najib's venomous smirk no longer trembled with doubt. They curled into fists, ironclad and ready to shatter whatever chains bound him. His gaze burned with the fire of a man who had been forged in loneliness, but refused to be consumed by it. "This palace no longer shelters traitors," he declared, voice low but seething with authority. "Tonight, we root out the shadows that have crept into our home." Her lips parted in a breathless whisper, courage threading through the fragility. Loyalty must rise anew from the ashes left behind. Together, they advanced like a tempest, weaving through the labyrinth of gilded halls, where every carved column and jeweled tapestry seemed to bear silent witness to the enduring struggle. The air was heavy with the scent of rare spices mingling with the faint aroma of jasmine, now tainted by the bitter tang of betrayal. Footsteps, soft and calculated, grew nearer, a symphony of impending conflict that stirred the palace to its core. The sheikh's heart drummed with urgency, his eyes sharp as a scimitar's edge. "Have the guards sealed the inner gates? No one enters or leaves without my command." She met his gaze with unwavering resolve. Every exit locked, every corridor watched. But Najib's reach creeps unseen. A flicker of uncertainty flashed briefly across his face before he masked it with regal composure. "Then we face this scourge head-on." They paused before the grand hall, where moonlight spilled like liquid silver across the marble floor. There, standing tall despite the weight of his crimes, was Najib, his presence a dark stain against the palace's glow. His eyes glinted with cruel triumph as he met the Sheikh's unwavering stare. "Still clinging to illusions, are we?" Najib taunted, voice dripping venom. "The empire you think you command teeters on ruins built by lies and silence." The Sheikh advanced a step, the power in his stance undeniable. "The truth binds more tightly than your treachery ever could." A bitter laugh tore from Najib's throat. "Truth? It's currency for the blinded and the weak. The desert will consume all your pride." The princess stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on the Sheikh's sleeve, steadying him amid the storm. "We are not pawns in this cruel game. We fight for more than power. We fight for the love you tried so hard to poison." For a fleeting moment, the cold gulf between them narrowed, bridges forged by defiance and hope. But swiftly, the sound of steel drawing echoed, sharp and unforgiving. Najib's allies emerged from hidden alcoves, guards swayed by greed or fear, their swords glinting beneath the flickering torches. The palace, once a symbol of opulence and sanctuary, exploded into chaos. The Sheikh's hand clasped hers, their fingers tangled like lifelines amid the tempest. "This ends tonight, not with whispers, but with the roar of justice." Her breath caught, eyes shimmering with unshed tears that spoke of battles both won and lost. For every scar, there will be healing. For every deception, truth. The clash of steel rang through the vaulted halls as silks whipped through the air and shadows danced in spiral fury. Their shared resolve ignited a fierce energy, a wildfire against the creeping darkness. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the tumult. The Sheikh's gaze snapped upwards toward the grand balcony, where shadows curled like smoke. There, wrapped in midnight and betrayal, moved a figure whose very presence chilled the air. Layla. A shudder raced through his spine. The layers of deceit stretched deeper than Najib's poison, weaving a web that threatened to strangle what little hope remained. Commands tore from his lips, but his eyes tracked the vanishing silhouette, the ghost of a past thought buried, now bleeding fresh wounds. The princess drew closer, her voice a fierce whisper that tore through the chaos. "We cannot trust even those closest. The danger lies within." He swallowed hard, the weight of his world pressing down as cold realization struck like a blade to the heart. Layla's betrayal is the darkest wound of all. Beyond the shattered calm, the desert wind howled, a mournful dirge. The palace trembled beneath secrets clawing to the surface. And as dawn's first cruel light pierced the horizon, a silent fear took root. The greatest battle was not with Najib's men, nor with the whispered conspirators in the corridors. It was a war within, one that threatened to undo them, piece by fragile piece, with a name that cut deeper than any sword. Layla. The grand hall remained charged with a suffocating stillness, as if the very walls braced for the weight of the storm to come. The scent of jasmine lingered faintly, now twisted with the acrid bite of betrayal and whispered threats. The moonlight struggled to pierce the heavy shadows cast by towering pillars, those ancient sentinels that had witnessed centuries of power and deception. The Billionaire Sheikh stood tall, his posture a blend of steel will and quiet exhaustion. The flicker of resolve in his dark eyes belied the tempest raging beneath. A man torn between vengeance and the fragile hope rekindled by the woman beside him. She moved closer, her footsteps a soft cadence on the marble floor, the rustle of silk blending with his measured breath. For a moment, their hands almost met, hovering at the brink of contact, but pride and fear still held them apart. Time seemed to fold in on itself, memories and emotions crashing together like the relentless desert winds beyond the palace walls. 3 years of silence, cold and unyielding, threatened to bury any chance of peace beneath. Layers of mistrust. Yet tonight, with Najib's treachery exposed and the palace teetering on the edge of war, the invisible chains that had bound their hearts began to loosen. "Najib's reach is deeper than we imagined," she whispered, voice steady despite the tremor underlining each word. "His allies are hidden in plain sight, blending seamlessly with those sworn to protect us." He nodded slowly, the weight of his crown pressing down heavier than the robes draped across his shoulders. "I have underestimated the darkness festering within these walls. No longer. Tonight, every shadow will be cast into the light." Their eyes locked, the unspoken promise between them a fragile flame in the oppressive night. The palace had become a maze of deception, where every smile hid a dagger, every friendship a potential betrayal. But together, they vowed to reclaim the honor stolen from them. Suddenly, the silence shattered with a distant clatter, urgent footsteps echoing through vast corridors. The mention of a breach had come from the chief guard moments before, and now every servant and sentinel moved with fearful haste. The southern wing, once a sanctuary, was overrun by Najib's loyalists. The Sheikh's jaw clenched, muscles taut beneath embroidered silk. His hand found hers at last, fingers entwining in a desperate grip that spoke of shared resolve and unspoken apologies for years lost. Warmth seeped through the bond, challenging the cold reserve both had worn like armor. "We will face this darkness, side by side," he vowed, voice a low growl that shook the heavy marble air. She met his gaze fiercely. "No secret can threaten what we rebuild tonight." Together, they moved through the labyrinthine halls, every step a declaration of defiance against the creeping shadows. The rich aromas of incense and spices that had once swelled comfortingly now clung as memories to the air, tainted by the metallic tang of fear. Their passage stirred restless whispers among courtiers, some loyal, others waiting for the slightest crack in their united front. At the entrance to the grand gallery, Najib awaited, his presence poisonously assured. His cruel smile was bolder under the torchlight, eyes gleaming with wicked triumph. "You still cling to your illusions of power," he sneered. "But like the desert sand, your empire will crumble, blown away by truths you refuse to see." The Sheikh stepped forward, voice hard as tempered steel. I stand not on illusions, but on truth. And tonight, you will answer for your treachery. Najib's laugh was a jagged blade cutting through the charged silence. Truth is what serves the victor, Sheikh, and soon I'll be the one holding the crown. The princess tightened her grip on the Sheikh's arm, a silent anchor amidst the brewing tempest. You underestimate the strength born from love and loyalty. We are not so easily broken. A tense stillness fell between the three, a fragile moment before chaos. Then, like shadows freed from their prisons, Najib's conspirators emerged from concealed alcoves. Their blades gleamed under the flickering light, a chorus of cold steel singing the anthem of rebellion. The palace erupted into a whirlwind of fury. Silk gowns twisted in frantic movements. Echoes of clash and cry reverberated through vaulted ceilings. Yet amidst the turmoil, the Sheikh's hand remained firmly clasped with hers, a tether binding them against betrayal and despair. Their eyes met, sweat glistening and hearts pounding, as they fought not only the invaders, but the ghosts of their fractured past. His usual unyielding mask cracked briefly, revealing the torment of a man who had loved and lost, but refused to yield. Amid the uproar, a piercing scream shredded the chaos, unexpected, urgent. The Sheikh's gaze snapped upward toward the grand balcony, where moving shadows danced like smoke curling through the night's breath. There stood Layla, her figure cloaked in midnight, her features impossibly familiar, yet distant as a ghost. The sight struck through the Sheikh like a knife hidden beneath silk. A betrayal so deep it threatened to unravel the fragile threads of hope that had begun to entwine their souls. "She's slipping away," the princess breathed fiercely, eyes narrowing like a falcon's in the dark. "The enemy is not only without, but within." The Sheikh's voice pitched low, laced with raw pain and furious determination. "Layla's treachery cuts deeper than Najib's poison. Her betrayal will be the death of us all, unless we find her first." Outside, the desert wind rose in tandem with the mounting storm, howling through the palace gardens like a harbinger of ruin. The first pale fingers of dawn crept hesitantly over the dunes, painting the sky with cruel hues of rose and ash. But the greatest battle was not yet fought, not in corridors strewn with shattered glass and spilled blood, nor in the clash of swords beneath glittering chandeliers. It waited in the shadows of hearts bruised by love and war, in a name whispered like a curse that would shatter everything the billionaire Sheikh had built and everything he had dared to hope for. Layla. The first rays of dawn spilled gently over the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the vast desert and flooding the palace's grand chambers with soft light. The storm that had threatened to tear apart the empire within those walls had finally passed. Silence, deep and profound, settled like a healing balm. In the heart of the palace, the billionaire Sheikh stood beside his bride, their hands entwined, no longer hesitant, but firm and resolute. The shadows of betrayal that had haunted them for years had been unmasked and vanquished. Najib's treachery lay exposed, his allies captured or broken. The whispered conspiracies were laid bare for all to see, their venom drained by the truth's piercing light. The Sheikh's dark eyes, once cold and guarded, now held a peace earned through fire and forgiveness. His gaze found the woman who had stood unwavering beside him, her strength a quiet force that had shattered his walls and healed his wounds. Her silken gown shimmered in the morning light, but it was the warmth in her eyes that shone brightest, a testament to battles endured and a love reborn. "Today," he said softly, voice thick with a tenderness born of years lost to silence, "we claim more than a throne. We claim the future we deserve, together." She smiled, a fragile yet radiant curve of lips that spoke of hope, resilience, and the gentle promise of new beginnings. The cold distance that had once defined their union was gone, replaced by an intimacy forged through trials and treasured in quiet moments. No longer prisoners of the past, they were architects of their shared destiny. Outside the grand hall, the court gathered, faces once clouded with fear and suspicion, now softened with relief and admiration. Whispers of the Sheikh's courage and the princess's bravery spread like wildfire, restoring faith in the empire's heartbeat. The palace no longer echoed with shadows, but with laughter, renewed vows, and the harmonious rhythms of life restored. A fragrant breeze wove through the open windows, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and amber, their favorite fragrances mingling as if nature itself celebrated the union's rebirth. The fountains in the gardens sparkled under the rising sun, their waters singing a melody of peace and renewal. The Sheikh turned to his bride, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "You have been my strength when I was weakest. Your love has taught me that even the deepest wounds can heal." Tears shimmered in her eyes, reflecting the golden light. "And you, my Sheikh, have shown me that pride can be the fiercest prison. But freedom is found in forgiveness." They stepped closer, the space between them dissolving completely as their lips met in a kiss that was both a farewell to their past and a vow for all the tomorrows to come. The world outside seemed to hold its breath, honoring the moment where two souls made whole by pain now walked side by side into the dawn of a shared life. In the quiet that followed, the Sheikh spoke once more, eyes shining. "Let us rebuild this empire, not just with wealth or power, but with love and trust. Our people deserve nothing less." She nodded, her heart fluttering like the delicate wings of a desert butterfly. Together, they moved through the palace corridors, their footsteps light but purposeful. Every corner seemed laden with memories, some bitter, others sweet, but all now woven into the tapestry of their renewed bond. Within the golden walls, the echoes of past betrayals gave way to songs of hope. Servants smiled genuinely, courtiers whispered blessings, and laughter blossomed freely once more. The Sheikh and his bride had reclaimed not only their place, but their faith in one another. The gardens bloomed as if responding to their union. Flowers unfurled vibrant petals. The sun cast playful shadows on ancient stones, and birds sang melodies of joy and freedom. The desert beyond stood magnificent and eternal, a silent witness to a love story that had weathered storms darker than the longest nights. As the sheikh and the princess stood beneath a blossoming jasmine tree, their hands tightly clasped, a gentle breeze tousled her hair. The future gleamed like the sun rising over golden dunes, full of promise, resilience, and the endless possibility of happiness. No longer bound by silence or fear, their hearts beat in unison, steady, strong, and free. And in that radiant morning light, the empire and the love it sheltered began anew.